everything goes faster, the production of the news, but also it goes faster on the commercial side and on the marketing side. And with the crisis of the media that came out in the in the mid 2000s, the commercial side in every newsroom has become more and more important because traditional revenues were going down, and there was the need to find new revenues. And so the marketing people, this is how we used to call them in newsrooms, believed that it was important that they have a bigger room in a bigger space in the newsroom. So within a few years, as Professor Charlie Beckett from the London School of Economics said, only the mercantile value justified the existence of the products, and only those with a merchant spirit within the media companies are qualified to decide which news to bring forward. So it means that in many newsrooms, marketing people have begun to decide what was newsworthy and what was not, which is completely the opposite to what newsrooms were used to do before, meaning deciding what news was important and then trying to market them. But as this unraveled, also some initiatives came out to try to tackle with the issues that were a consequence of what is called the commercial correctness. And we have here 4 guests who are dealing with this issue, each on its own level. I will briefly present them, starting from your right. Jean-Jacques Jespers. He was a journalist at RTBF, the public French-speaking Belgian broadcaster. He's a teacher also at the VUB-ULB, the Brussels Free University, and he's the president of the Belgian Journalistic Ethics Council and an occasional host to a satirical program at the RTBF. Then we have Denis Tessou. Denis Tessou is the head of Agence France Presse Media Lab. He's a journalist, correct me if I'm wrong, with a background in informatics and innovation management. He's like the kind of geek within Agence France Presse, which is a big media public-owned company.
Not public, but...
now he's participated in a number of European, what it's called in the EU jargon, FP7 and H2020 projects. Those are projects usually in the tech sector or innovations sector. And he's currently a member of the Global Alliance for Media Innovation, which was launched by the World Association of Newspaper and Publishers. It's a big association of mostly traditional legacy media. And he has launched we can call it a program, an application called InVid, and he's going to illustrate it later for fact-checking videos. Then we have Bénédicte Autret. Bénédicte was born French, but is now a British citizen. You're the head of strategic relations, news and publishers for UK and Benelux at Google, and also the North Africa and Middle East strategic responsible for relationships, or also at Google. And you used to work with the traditional publishers across Europe, as far as I understand.
Yes.
And last but not least, we have Peter Smet. Peter Smet is Dutch, and you're an innovation manager in the Dutch Journalism Fund, which has been involved in some of the most recent and also illustrious journalism startups in the Netherlands, which include Blendel, which is a platform for, it's like iTunes for newspapers, if I can simplify, and also for The Correspondent, which some of you might know, and for Local Focus, which is a partner of our European Data Journalism Network. So I'm quite happy to have you here. So without further ado, I would suggest that we start. let me introduce briefly myself. I'm Gianpaolo Accardo. I'm the editor, executive editor and co-founder of Vox Europe. It's media in different languages on European topics, and also Secretary General of the Association des journalistes européens French section. So I would like now you to make your presentations, starting with Benedict. I hope everything is ready.
So the first slide is my name in big, but that's okay. I'll just move to the next slide. What I thought I would do very quickly today is just do two things. Is tell you why we care, because that's the questions I get the most when I engage with some of your peers in the industry. And then the second thing I'd like to show you is some of the data points coming from the Innovation Fund, so the D&I Innovation Fund, because I think it just shows some interesting trends as to what's happening and where the innovation is coming from. So clearly, the screen is not optimized, but this is a quote from our CEO. And, I've been at Google 12 years, and I can see, a really, really focus from our CEO when he took over, 2 or 3 years ago. And this is a topic that is very key to him. And it's not just a philanthropic topic. Of course, it aligns with our values, and we believe in, free expressions and democracy. But it's also a matter of business, and I'll try to explain why. At the core, Google is a search business. And if there is no quality information out there, then search hasn't got a really bright future. So this is where our futures are tied. And this is why we have a vested interest in making sure that, all of the media companies out there are sustainable and can really thrive, because otherwise, then there is nothing to search for. I'm reducing slightly, but it's true, though. There is key to some of the queries that we see our users performing. And then the second element, which is very much in line with our ads business, is when it comes to powering ads, we're very much an enabler. We provide you with the software to serve ads and to optimize the yield on the pages. And the business model here is a rev share. So if the news organization don't grow, then our business in display doesn't grow. So I just, wanted to point out those two factors. And then I'm going to move into, more of the D&I. I'm just conscious of the time. So this is, the short URL that you can go to if you want to learn more about the Google News Initiative, which has 3 pillars and 3 big focus on how to engage. I'll just wait until you take the picture. And so the other thing I wanted to show you is some data points from the Innovation Fund. You may not know, so who has heard here of the Innovation Fund? Or I should say maybe who hasn't heard of the Innovation Fund? Okay, so only a few of you, so I'm not going to, explain what it is, but it's effectively a pot of money that we've committed to foster innovation within the news industry. And we're in the 3rd year, the final year. We're in the middle of round 5, and there is another round towards the end of the year. And this is the data that has come out of the first few rounds. So those are the numbers, the money that we've given so far in the first 4 windows, and it's across Europe. And the other thing I wanted to show you is the trends in terms of who applies and what type of projects they're applying for. So as you can see, it's a very diverse set of companies or even individuals who apply. There is no criteria. The only criteria is it has to touch news and innovation. So there needs to be an element of technology. There is an independent council that reviews, a short list of the bigger projects, and those guys sets kind of the the focus for each round. So at the beginning, we were very wide, and then we refined. And the latest rounds were more around monetization. And when we said monetization, the industry heard paywall. So this current round, which we're in the middle of, we said diversification of revenues. So please think, also outside of just the paywall, and think of, other consumer revenues ideas. Those are, all the topics that came through. And there is no real methodology to categorize the projects. So the fund team came up with their own categorization, which is reflected here. So as you can see, some big categories, and then some subcategories within each of those big topics. And the one highlighted in dark gray are the ones which have the most, project, which I will illustrate here, which shows you the distribution between the different topics. And what's interesting is the next journalism is the biggest one. And so that includes, gamification, data journalism, VR, AR, and also fact-checking. And so a little bit of an anecdote, the DNI was funding projects around fact-checking before it came that big of a thing, which already was showing the trends that the industry was going towards to. And I'm going to stop here. What this is the fund report. This is a great resource to have a look at the type of projects and inspire collaborations amongst the organization out there and pick up some ideas that are going on in different countries. And with that, I think this is you, Denis, or? Yeah.
Thank you, Bénédicte, for being sharp and short. For full disclosure, I have to say that we as a Vox Europe benefit from a DNI funding from the last call.
So which round? The round 4 then?
Yes.
Yeah. And which category were you in?
I was trying to understand which one.
You were
I think collaborative.
Okay.
So please, Denis Tessou, would you like to show us what InVid is about?
So thank you. Do you hear me? Yeah, it's okay. I brought my own return screen, sorry. Okay. So thank you very much for your kind invitation. That's an honor to be here in Brussels and also to speak during this World Press Freedom Day, especially because one of our colleagues at AFP, a photographer from Kabul, died a few days ago in a blast, so that's a bit of emotion. And a tribute for him, also for this World Press Freedom Day. And I'm going to present the InVid project. InVid is a European project, is a Horizon 2020 project dealing with verification of social media video content for the news industry. We also started before the wake of fake news. We started on the 1st of January 2016. And this is a 3-year project, and we are going to finish at the end of this year. So we are developing several tools within the project. We are developing a platform for detecting newsworthy content. We are detecting another application, a full application for verification. And we have released a few months ago, in July last year, a plugin, a free verification browser plugin, which works with Chrome and Firefox. And this plugin is in fact a toolbox with 7 different tools that helps journalists to verify images and videos. So that's free of charge. That's available on the Chrome Store directly, or on our website, the InVid project, where you see well, maybe you don't see it, but you will see it in another slide later on, directly on our website for Firefox. So this plugin, we developed it during the first semester of 2017 during the Crosscheck campaign. Crosscheck was a collaboration campaign between 37 French media on the French presidential elections to debunk fake news of disinformation around the elections during several months. We started something like in February, and we ended in June with the parliament elections. So InVid right now that's a tool to empower journalists against fake news and clickbait as well. Because as you know, when there are breaking news, many media, most of the time, without verifying too much, are reusing pictures and videos that are rising on social networks. And here you can see some of our users, like France 24 observers, BBC social media, Eurovision, Deutsche Welle, and German televisions, New York Times, and others. In fact, we have more than 3,000 users now from more than 100. Oh, sorry, I go. Well, one slide. Okay. So more than 3,000 users from 100 countries right now, according to Google Analytics statistics. And I'm going to show you a few examples. Here, that's debunking fake images. So this is an image of firemen against police, which is supposed to be on in October 2017 during the Catalonian referendum. In fact, when we look at this image, so with the plugin, with the contextual menu, we have a possibility here to, we have a possibility to trigger different services. So we can use an image magnifier to look at implicit knowledge within the image to improve the image and to see whether we have some kind of signs or textual indication within the image that helps us to find out in which location, for instance, the event has occurred. But we are also using the big data of Google Images, Baidu, the Chinese search engine, Yandex, the Russian search engine, and TinEye, the Canadian image reverse search engine. And we use the big data, the complementary big data, the complementary indexes of those search engines to find out whether those images have been already published on the web in somewhere else. And in fact, here, in this example, you find out very quickly in Google that those pictures, in fact, this particular picture was already published in 2013, and it was just a protest for a budget cost at that time. It has nothing to see with the Catalonian referendum. Another example now with a video. This video appeared on Facebook on November 24th when there was a blast in a mosque in the Sinai, in Egypt. And this is mixing the two. So this is the view of our plugin. We have these 7 tools at the top there. And we have a keyframes tool, which is a tool that is going to analyze the video, to fragment the video into keyframes. And we keep only one particular, the best, our algorithm think is the best algorithm for each sequence of the video. And for each of those pictures, we are going to be able later on to perform similarity search again with all those search engines. So here, for instance, I downloaded the video and just uploading it back. And I find out all those thumbnails from the video. And here, again, a contextual search, right-click to find out on the search engine whether those images have been already published somewhere else in the past. Here, I used Yandex, the Russian search engine, which is quite good for everything which is about Middle East and, sorry, you're right. I have a problem of connecting the dots. So here, I used Yandex because Yandex is very good for everything which is about former Soviet Union, Turkey, and Middle East. And I find out quite quickly here that this particular video was already published in 2015, and it was another blast, but it occurred in Saudi Arabia. And everything was debunked by the BBC. There's a link at the bottom, which is not very visible here. So here you have a tweet on the left side, and we also can verify tweets. We have a Twitter advanced search, and we are using a trick that Twitter is allowing. We are able to find content, any kind of content from Twitter from the past without APIs, so without application programming interfaces. We are just using interval of dates. And here, for instance, I use the the account of the man who was quoted on the previous slide, and I put 48 hours here interval of time, and I can just here retrieve directly with operators here since and until. I can retrieve any kind of content from the past. What does the program, in fact, is converting automatically the unique timestamp, which is for computer people the number of seconds since the 1st of January 1970. We convert the calendar directly into this, and this is understood by Twitter, so we can retrieve any tweet from the past and check tweets as well. Then, sorry, just in summary, just check it out. That's free. That's available. You just can use this link, invid-project.eu/verify, or you just type invid within the Chrome store directly, and you will find this free plugin, which is available to everybody for verifying quickly pictures, videos, and tweets on Chrome and Firefox. And here is a view of the consortium. So the 9 partners of the INVID project, funded by the European Union, and with 2 media partners, AFP and Deutsche Welle, and led by the Information Technology Institute from Thessaloniki in Greece.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denis Tessou, for this presentation. So please have a look at InVid, download the plugin, and then you will be able to debunk videos in a second, which is quite useful these days, especially before sharing videos on a social network. Jean-Jacques Jespers, you've been working the last years mostly on the ethics of journalism. Can you summarize what you've been working on? I think you have also a presentation which is doing this.
Well, I've been teaching media accountability since 2003 at the Brussels French-speaking University, and on the 1st of January this year, I've been appointed chairman of the Press Council, of the Belgian French-speaking Press Council. So I will not go on a technical point of view. I will speak of something else, ethics. Maybe it is something a little bit obsolete in journalism, but we have in Belgium a short experience of the existence and functioning of a press council. It has been founded in 2009, and I wanted to make a short. How does it work? I wanted you to see this sentence coming from a statement made by the chairman of the Swiss Corporation of Newspaper Publishers in 2016. And he says, a sharp distinction between advertising and the editorial part of a newspaper becomes much harder to stretch than 20 years ago, when the financial situation allowed to place editorial independence on top of any other consideration. This is the main problem now for the press and for information. It is that editors, publishers have a big tendency to consider that the main problem for them is, of course, profit and not good news. And so there is a constant mixing between editorial content and advertising. The main example of that is what they call native advertising, which is editorial content, but sponsored by advertisers. Can self-regulation be a remedy to that? That's, of course, a big question. I have no answer to that, but I will try to explain how it works French-speaking Belgium. Self-regulation implies both journalists and publishers in a process, a long process and a difficult process of evaluating the risks and of establishing guidelines in view of their common interest. Their common interest is credibility and, of course, durability of the media. Our press council, there are 32 press councils in Europe now, with an international association called AIPCE, and we are one of these press councils, one of the 2 press councils in Belgium, Dutch-speaking and French-speaking. There are, in this council, there are 6 members coming from the Journalists Association, 6 representing the medias, 6 experts and members of the NGOs and so on, and 2 chief editors. We are observing and controlling and regulating all media, print, audio, video, online, blogs, social media, etc. It's a private organ, but officially recognized by a decree of 2009. And it is funded, half the budget comes from the member medias and half the budget comes from a grant through the Journalists Association. What are we doing? But we are writing and publishing codes and guidelines. A certain code has been adopted in 2013. And since then, there have been 9 or 10 specific guidelines about specific problems. We give advice and information to newsrooms, administrations, citizens groups, and so on. We also have a mission of mediation, ombudsman, and mainly we receive and deal with ethical complaints coming from the large public. You don't have to be personally concerned by the complaint. You can just consider that there is a problem and enter a complaint. Though anyone may report a case, the complaints are deeply examined, both parties are consulted, and as a decision, complaint is considered either well-founded, partially founded, or ill-founded. If the complaint is considered well-founded, the media has to publish the decision of the CDJ, a summary of it, at least, on his website's homepage, and also a hyperlink below the disputed content pointing to the decision, the full text of the decision. In the code that we have adopted in 2013, you find this article. Journalists preserve their independence and reject any form of pressure. They accept instructions only from their editorial officials. They refuse injunctions wherever they come from against the journalistic code of ethics. They are not compelled to accept any injunction in opposition with the editorial line of the media to which they are contributing. And another article says, journalists do not contribute to advertising or non-journalistic communication activities. It is very important because of the precarity in the journalistic profession. There are more and more young journalists who have to complete their revenue by participating in advertising projects and so on. The editorial staff makes sure that advertisements are presented in a way that avoids any confusion with informative reports. Brands, films, personalities, events, institutions are mentioned only on the basis of journalistic criteria. And when journalists give an account of an event sponsored by their media, this is also very important because many media now are sponsors of public events, and there is a tendency of giving more editorial space to these events, of course, and a little less to events that are sponsored by competitors. So if there is an event sponsored by their media, they use the same ethical rules as for another event. We have 2 guidelines that we have adopted. One about distinguishing advertising from journalism, of course. And another one has been, it's the same guidelines reviewed to take care of how to deal with native advertising. Native advertising, I just said what it is about. Well, that's what I had to tell you. Of course, I'm open to all questions about it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jean-Jacques. And now, lastly, and not least, Peter Smet. So you work for the Dutch Journalism Fund. Would you like to explain how the fund works? Unfortunately, we don't have any slide to show, so you will be the show.
I will have to do it with words, if that's okay with everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Smet from the Dutch Journalism Fund. I think we've existed for something like 45 years, but the big change came about 7 years ago, 2011. Right now we are a fund that is involved in innovation. We also do our own research, which is mostly on the state of local and regional journalism in the Netherlands. And we are also a news site, quite popular in the Netherlands, solely about journalism news, kind of like the Dutch Nieman Lab. But what I do, I'm involved in innovation. And ever since 2011, we are government, well, we've always been government funded, but the government decided that there should be something done about the, how shall we put it, downslide of the journalism sector because it was losing so much revenue. So they decided to bump our budget and let us subsidize or fund new journalistic innovations, either independent startups or if it would be an innovation project within a larger legacy media house, like a publisher or a broadcaster. So I think we've had about 20 rounds of that now, and quite a lot has changed when it comes to that. At first, we gave we gave quite large sums of money, upwards of like $500,000 million, euros, of course, to Dutch media startups, and then slowly that has been going down, that number. And of course, it's easy to speak of the successes, as Jean-Paul just did. Yes, we can say we have funded Blendel, and yes, we have the Correspondent, and yes, there's Local Focus and some other media companies. But I think that's about somewhere between 5 and 10 out of the 80 that you could possibly, 80 to 100 that you could possibly know. Maybe even more, maybe even 150, if I think back to it. So we have always been evaluating and changing up what we are doing. And I think the biggest realization that we had is that in the past, we have been a very traditional fund. Most funds work in the same way. You go to a fund, you apply for a certain sum of money. For that sum of money, you get to complete a project or set something up. And after a certain amount of time, in our case a year, we would ask what the results are, and you would either say, good stuff, it worked out, or, I'm not really sure how we're doing now. So I don't have the facts and figures with me, so it's going to be a bit of a broad stroke, but I think if you look at what we did in the past, we gave upwards to 100,000 euros. That's until I came along 2 years ago. And then people had 1 year to complete what they were doing. I think about 50% of those projects actually finished on time, which is not to say that's a bad thing. Innovation takes a long time, but that time constraint that we put on it didn't really work. And if we were lucky, also 50% of those projects actually found some kind of sustainability, longevity, which also after a year doesn't say a whole lot. The average startup takes about 5 to 6 years to actually prove what they're doing and become really sustainable. So what we did last year is I said, I think coaching people is worth much, much more than putting money into them. So I cut down the subsidies from a maximum of a maximum of 100,000 to 35,000. And instead of giving people a year, I put them in a program of 6 months. And the results went way up. All the projects were finished on time. We're also not doing complete project, but only letting people make a prototype or a pilot of what they were doing, and then presenting them to the market. And then either they had to find customers or some other financiers like investors who could help them fund further and develop further. And out of the 16 projects that were there last year, they found 38 matches. So that's great. So then we went full force into that program. So this year, for the first time, I'm running the Dutch Journalism Accelerator. I just selected 22 projects, and they can range from, let me give you an example. There's a 19-year-old student who is running an Instagram account about political journalism. We're helping her. But we're also helping one of the biggest legacy magazines in the Netherlands, journalism magazines, Vrij Nederland, which was founded in the Second World War as a resistance paper, to try and get them to a digital subscription model so they can actually get back into the black numbers by, I think, the end of next year. So there's a big range of what's going on. Also, what I also said is, I'm not giving you money up front anymore. There's no application for that. All we're going to do now is you can come into my program, 7 months, and in that program you're going to get a personal mentor. We're going to have all kinds of skill coaches. We're going to see each other every month, all 22 of us, with 10 coaches. So there's around 80 people, and every month we're going to look together at what you need at this moment. So are you going to build team skills? Do you need to hire an external developer if you don't have one? All that kind of stuff. And so month by month we're going to do a real accelerator program, but then funded by public money, and see what's going to come out of that. So that's very, very exciting.
Okay, so you're like a sort of media incubator.
Exactly.
There are many in Paris, for example, or also a few in Brussels now. Okay, thanks for your explanation. I would like to go back to Benedicte. So Google is helping the media with those the DNI initiative, first of all. But why should the media trust Google?
Easy question.
That's an easy question. So do you believe the two statements that I put on the slide? Or do you question those statements?
I mean, it's a private company, so one could think that it would pursue its own interests rather than the public good.
Absolutely. We've never said that, our interests were not aligned, which is why I thought it was worthwhile putting those two statements. Because when it comes to the core product that Google is, search, if you don't succeed, and by you I mean, all the media organization out there, and again, I'll say it again, if there is no quality information out there, the search business that we operate will at some point die because users won't find what they're looking for using our service. So and I know it sounds maybe too high level, but it's so true, because users can go, especially on the internet, there is only one click away from the next, service. So that's the first statement. When it comes to ads, I see the world of ads, and the caveat is I come from that world within Google. I only joined, the DNI team 2 years ago. So my background is not in journalism. I joined that team because this is my passion, and I really believe, as a user, in the plurality of news. So when it comes to ads, Google is primarily, capturing advertising when it comes to search. This is a performance marketing mix. So this is where the advertisers say, I want to find the the users who are looking to buy a new car. And you're going to help me because I want to target those users who are looking for BMW, you know, whatever the latest model, and then you can help me target those people. And then display, as I put there, we're just the pipe. So I know it's hard to maybe understand, but in there, we just power your ads business. We give you the tools to make ads work better for you. So,
on your platform.
but tell me more. What do you mean? And
well,
maybe you can.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Facebook and Google together, they drive around between 75 and 80% of the online advertising, which is a de facto monopoly. So, and Google is also in a kind of way, self-feeding this mechanism. And some media complain that they are losing advertising revenues to the platform. So it's like if, in a way, you're helping the media, but in another way, with the other hand, you are taking revenues away from them by monopolizing the advertising. How do you help them also in that way?
So the first thing I would say is in that digital advertising world, we're very different from Facebook because most of the revenue that we capture goes to search. Facebook is just a display advertising product. So I think that's the first thing. You need to compare apples with apples, not pears with apples. And when it comes to the search business, I think, you know, the legacy advertising product that media organization had was classified. You know, if you want to compare like for like. But media organization were never in the search business. So, you know, that performance-driven targeting. So that's the one thing. When it comes to display, again, we're different from Facebook in the sense that Facebook is a closed environment and they put display ads on that environment. We only make money when you, as media organization, have ads on your site, and we power that. So we give you the tools to do yield optimization. And we're not the only tools in the market. You know, there are alternatives out there. So I take your point, but I think it's an easy conclusion to make. And, you know, people are not really comparing apples with apples. So that's the point I would like to make.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
Because it always kind of, to your defense, right? It always kind of baffles me, this discussion, to be very honest. Look, if you look at newspapers and TV stations, they were the platforms of old, right? It's the place where you came to be connected to the world. And sure, there was journalism in a newspaper, but there was also opinion, entertainment, and ads, and the same kind of for television. And then there came new technology, and then there were new platforms. Google and Facebook are the biggest ones, and they're just doing that platform thing better. So why, if there is a competitor out there who's doing it better than you are, then I don't really see why you should then help the people who are worse at it than you are by I don't know. I'm even struggling with my words because it's so difficult for me.
I think it comes from the advertisers.
It comes from the advertisers.
What is the advertiser looking for?
Exactly.
And either they're in the business of getting leads to convert into sales, or they want to address a wide audience as a brand marketing exercise.
Exactly.
And so it's finding what is the right medium.
Advertisers.
And I think we find ourselves in that, you know, leads generation. And when it comes to the brand advertising, it's, you know, it's for the media organization to find their place. And we're powering that. Thank you for coming to my defense.
I'm always asking, even if advertisers advertisers are looking for a platform. They're not looking for journalism. They don't really.
They're looking for buyers,
Exactly.
for customers.
They're looking for customers, and they want to be as specific as they can be in that sense. So it's logical that they're going to go to the place where they can find those people. I would say, counter to your point, I would say, shouldn't we look for the value of journalism in itself and not as the vehicle for powering advertisers? That's the real question.
Now the power balance is in favor of the marketing side, and we are really at the core of our.
Do you really think that? Because I don't agree. That's only in the old model.
Let's hear what Jean-Jacques Jespers has to say about that. And we are really at the core of the topic we have chosen for this panel.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the main problem is this, resisting commercial correctness in the newsroom. And of course, as you said before, there is a tendency to news marketing. And how could journalists resist that? Because at this very moment, they are under a terrible pressure because newspapers, television stations, even online media are in a deep situation of terrible competition, and they are trying to reduce the costs, and there are social plans, there are more and more journalists that are working under terrible working conditions. So they are not in a good position to resist this tendency of news marketing. How can it change? I'm pessimistic because I don't see any real solution at this very moment. Maybe what we are trying to do with the auto-regulation, with self-regulation, is one of the very little possibilities of resistance. But there ought to be also some form of reaction coming from the general public. If the readers, the viewers don't react to what the media are imposing them, well, the situation will worsen.
Why should the public react? I mean, they have so many, they can just switch to another media if they're not satisfied with the ones they are usually consulting. The offer is so wide.
But surely they value good quality journalism. So, if you educate and show the users that this is what you're getting, surely they will react and they will want to do something about it. I don't know. I'm posing the question.
Denis,
maybe I can jump in right now, but it's a bit difficult for me because the news agencies in France are forbidden. I mean, they cannot do advertising. That's prohibited by law for some 75 years ago, and it comes from the resistance, from the end of the Second World War. So we don't have at all advertising at AFP, but no agency in France, news agency, can have any kind of business with advertising. And on the opposite, we are an independent company, but we have general interest missions funded by the French state. So that's another way also to fund media. So there's models with advertising and other models that are publicly funded. But of course, that's publicly funded, that's funded also by taxpayers. So that's another way of funding independent media.
And regarding Invid, you said that the project is about to finish. What's next? I mean, do you have a plan for monetization for Invid to be self-sustainable?
We plan to. We have several exploitation plans. We are basically on a freemium model. We are monitoring what our users are doing, and one of the possibilities is to have some big media companies using it and having some specific needs, like, I don't know, processing 100 of videos per week or per month. And then we are going to try to find out some premium business model on that. We have applied for more European projects in the same field of verification, information verification. So we will maintain if we get funded in other projects. And we have also a possibility to appeal to philanthropic funds, for instance, to brand the plugin and to go on working in the development and in the maintenance of the plugin. But the plugin is also in open source. We have licensed it with an MIT license. So that's, I mean, at least all the functionalities which are coded inside the plugin, which are 4 out of 7. The others are calling servers. Those functionalities, I mean, they will last because even somebody else could take the lead on that, or an open source community could work with it. So we made it for long lasting, not to finish on 31 of December.
Okay. Thank you. Another question for Jean-Jacques Jespers. You're talking about self-regulation as a way to ensure ethics, but the speed of the way self-regulation works with all the appeals and so on is not the same speed as the news and the news are going. News are much faster now. Mm-hmm. So how do you match the two, let's say, the two timelines, the two speeds?
Of course, there are two timelines that don't fit together, but the main purpose is to show how it should be. And afterwards, of course, when a mistake or when a bad behavior has been pointed out, we hope that it will serve as an example to other people who are working on the same market. And it is that way that it works. In fact, we have noticed that now the decisions of the Press Council have been published in the newsrooms and are becoming sort of internal guidelines to these newsrooms. And I think it's getting a little better now. Maybe in the 3-4 last years, we have noticed a better understanding of what journalism ethics is and how it can be applied.
Okay, thank you. Peter Smet, how does your foundation and how do you personally set the priorities for what you are going to support, to subsidize? I mean, at the beginning of the year, you're saying, publicly stating that you will be helping this kind of specific kind of initiatives, or it's open? It's open.
It's open.
Complete.
We always want to be surprised by the trends that come out of the applications that are sent in.
And do you put innovation ahead of sustainability, or?
No, because also in that sense, I think innovation is often misunderstood in that I've often spoken with people who say, innovation, that's just kind of, pardon my French, bull, because it's just people who are trying to do some new stuff and it never really works. And I was saying, well, innovation is not about doing new stuff, it's about finding a new or a better solution to a problem that people actually have, right? So in that sense, innovation also encapsulates sustainability. That's already baked into it. So I'm trying to find the real innovation, not just trying to do something with functionality overload where people are like, well, we got this platform and you can do something with augmented reality, but you can also do VR, and also we have a map-based thing, and it's new because it has never been combined in that way before. And then I'm like, oh, that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm really looking for people who understand that there's a certain need here from a user, a certain problem, and it paints them that they can't do anything about it, or the solution that they have now is just kind of haphazard. And we think if we do it this way, it's way more efficient and it's way more effective, and now we can really do something about it.
Benedict, with the DNI, once a project has been funded, are you doing some kind of follow-up or?
Yeah, so I was interested in the accelerator model that Peter was talking about. So we don't release the money up front. So part of the process is, I think the applicant has to, so once, you start once they get the decision that they get some money, you start defining the project milestones, and then the money is released as they go through the milestone. So it's in stages, so they do what they said they were going to do. So there is a bit of governance, process there, because we just don't want to hand out money and then it doesn't go towards what the main purpose was. And so the project person then has the conversation with the fund team where they decide whether realistic milestones are, and then, but no, there is no. And in fact, I think that's some feedback that we've received from the industry, is how we could not handhold them a bit more. But the fundamentals of the fund is that it's completely independent. So I guess that's one of the reasons why we're not, helping them along the way by giving them more resource.
Because you could, right?
That's another ball game, ask, but in theory we can do everything, right?
So, one of the things we use is the, in brackets, Google Design Sprint, for example, to help.
But so we have another model which is the campus model, and there the campus lead tap into the Google workforce, and it's pro bono, so it's voluntary coaching. So anybody, can then be selected to be a coach of any campus startup. We haven't gone down that route for the Innovation Fund, but I think that's the model that was applied for the campus startup community.
Speaking about projects, Denis Tessou, when you drafted and wrote the project for INVID, you were confronted with European, you had to fill a lot of forms and so on. And do you think that the complexity of this kind of subsidies and grants is something that can keep away some potential grantees or it can prevent innovation because of its complexity and the time it takes to fill?
Well, I think the complexity has been reduced over the years. It was more complex and more bureaucratic during FP7. Now it's getting less problematic on this part. And you have more freedom also to develop things. I mean, in INVID, for instance, the plugin was not in the description of work at the very beginning. We had those platforms that we are still building. And the plugin came as a kind of fork, like in an open source development, as a kind of, we saw the necessity. We saw when you start having some kind of user-centric design and to apply design thinking methodologies and to listen to the users, then they don't ask the same thing that you thought 2 years before when you wrote the proposal. So they are asking for specific things, or they are working on a specific way. If we come back 3 years before, Instagram was not a mainstream platform at the time. Now it's becoming even for news. So things are changing, and we need to adapt to that. And so that we have this kind of flexibility within European projects as well. So that's a good point.
Okay, I would have a last question, then I will give the floor to the public and the mic to the public for questions. Very fast. starting with Jean-Jacques, we've been talking about involving the audience at some point in having some kind of overview over ethics and to point out what's unethical in their opinion. How important is and how easy is today to involve the public? Is it reacting? Is it committing? Is it engaging?
I didn't get the question.
Yeah, is the public reacting and engaging with news as much as before, let's say before the internet? Is it more involved in the news
I
verification?
couldn't answer the question in general, but what we have noticed is that there is a growing number of complaints addressed to the press councils and both press councils. And among these complaints, there is a growing number of founded complaints. So it means that maybe some people, at least, are more conscious of the problems of information and that they have a better view of how it should work, how information should work. That is our hope also when we are establishing a press council. It's that it's a form of media education because it gives people criteria and it gives people ideas about the functioning of the media. Of course, it takes time. There is an average delay of 1.5 months between the complaint and the decision. But never mind, it's not a problem. The problem, the impact will come later, but it will be effective.
Denis, do you have the impression that the public is more involved in
well, there's
checking?
There's an old empirical rule on the internet called the 90-9-1, and that's a bit inherited from Wikipedia. And this kind of rule is aimed, saying that 1% of the person are doing all the job, 9% are giving some help at some time, and 90% are lurkers and just looking at what the others are doing. And well, in Invid, we have a lot of users. We are very pleased with that. And we have also users not only from the journalistic side, we have users from Amnesty International, from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, for instance. We have all the NGOs dealing with human rights because the violation of human rights now comes with pictures and videos. They need to verify. We have emergency response as well. People who have a need, they have also the same kind of problems with sending an ambulance to some place where something might have happened, but there's nothing on place, so they need to check also videos and pictures. Media literacy people, there's a lot of concern about media literacy right now with images and videos. So we are very pleased with that, but in terms of feedback, we have little feedback. So we have a specific button feedback on the interface. To get the feedback, we get very little. We need to ask people to get to send feedback over time.
Maybe they're simply happy with the service.
Maybe. We hope.
Okay. Benedict, from your point of view, have you noticed something?
Well, so we just announced, some efforts in finding solutions to help publishers with subscription. So we're just giving the tool, and the principles are make it as easy as possible for the user to pay for content, so removing the frictions and leveraging the platform that we have, which is Play. And so that's very early stages, but it's trying to, and that stems from the trends that we've seen over the past years, where we see more the publishers going more diversification of revenues and trying to tap into consumer revenues, i.e. subscription, but it could be any other consumer revenues. So I'm based in London, and I think when the Guardian announced their project to go with membership, so voluntary contribution, kind of the industry mocked them, and they said, well, it's all well and good, but it's not going to work. They have healthy numbers, which is really encouraging. And also, when you look at what's happening in the US with regional press, there are some upshot of hyperlocal with a mixed business models as well, where they're really engaging with their audience. And I think that's the key. In this world, it's all about the value exchange. So if you're servicing a community and giving them what they care about, then they're going to respond well and maybe willing to contribute. And I'd just like to finish my this remark with something. I was lucky enough to go to ONA Washington last year, and one of the final sessions on the Saturday, it was about political satire, and on the back of everything that happened with the US election. I was, whatever your political views are, I was shocked to see the contempt of the political satire personalities on stage. When they were asked as part of the dialogue, what do you do about the other half, meaning the half that voted for Trump? The answer from one of the panelists was, do those people even know how to process information and to think? And it was political satire, but I just thought that was just showing how sometimes journalists are less in tune with the audience that they're supposed to provide information for, and that goes without a doubt that regardless of your political belief, I just think, we're missing that link. So any initiative that will go along this way to try to reconnect with your audience, I think is a good thing in my book.
Peter, do you agree on that? Do you see that there is a pattern or a trend in the proposals that you get that goes in that direction?
Oh, there's a lot of proposals I get when it comes to citizen/civic journalism. But they're almost always based on a idealism and a set of assumptions that don't really work. So they're almost always turned down, but that's okay. But I think more interesting trend I've seen. I'm not sure how it works in Belgium or in France or in any other country in the EU. But in the Netherlands, we've seen I think in the last year, the last 2 years, pretty much all of the comment sections on the news sites went down. And it was all because of the same reason, because there were too many people responding, and there was too much stuff to sift through. And that to me is crazy. You have users who want to do something with you as a journalist, they want to interact, and what the journalists say is, no, I'm too busy doing my real work, I don't want to talk to you. Right? Just imagine if you're in any other sector or any other business. Let's say you open a coffee shop and you buy all different kinds of coffee and you're really happy about it and you're going to sell this stuff to your customers, and you're also baking some cookies on the side, but you don't really care about them. And then people keep coming in and they just want your cookies and they don't really care about your coffee. And then you're going to say like, oh, well, I'm going to stop selling cookies because it's costing me too much time. I want to make coffee. No, get into that with the customers and get into that as journalists with the users and start working with that. And if it takes too much time, I'm really happy that, what was it again, Jigsaw is Perspective. That's also working on that, on how you can more easily redact the comment sections or stuff like that. But that's the stuff that needs to happen. We don't need to turn away from our users because there's some kind of old-fashioned idea about what the core workings are of being a journalist.
Yeah, but there are also some ethical implications in the sense that if a comment is against the law, you are responsible for its publication.
Sure.
So you have to manage them. And if you are a big media with a lot of comments,
but then
it's also a lot of
double
work.
down. You don't run away from it. I mean, what kind of journalistic principle would it be to say, no, we're going to silence this speech instead of getting on it?
I tend to agree with you, but it's also a question of resources. We foster comments on our platform, and we're also the only platform to provide a multilingual comment section with a translate button that's working with Google Translate. And we foster comments, but sometimes I have to spend a lot of time editing comments or rejecting them. But
Yeah, so
it's an editorial choice.
So the tool that Peter mentioned is sentiment analysis. So it allows you to triage, and then you have the very toxic comment. So it allows you to focus on that. And it's a free tool, and it's Jigsaw. So they do clever stuff with machine learning to provide tools. So in the same way they did Project Shield, which was about leveraging our firewall infrastructure against DDoS attack. So it's more for the freedom of speech, small NGOs, but any site can leverage them. And I think recently there was an attack in one of the German publishers, actually. So
you have also startups in artificial intelligence dealing with automatically with comments. There was a Finnish one. Don't remember the name, but some startups coming into this comment business.
Yeah, so you reduce the cost of doing that job.
And also to reconnect to the audiences, just to rebound on what you said before, I think that the mainstream media coming into the debunking of fake news and explaining to the audiences why it is fake and how they can see that by themselves is a good way also to regain trust with end users and readers.
Yeah, the explainers are
Yes.
very, very useful.
Okay, so now we have like 15 minutes for questions from the public. I think there's a mic available.
They open.
Where is it? So,
There's one here somewhere.
so we have a question from 1, 2, and 3 for starters. We'll start with these 3 and then we'll take some more. Please stand up when you ask your question if you want to introduce yourself briefly and ask questions and don't make statements, please.
My name is Julian Hale. I'm a freelance journalist and communications professional in Brussels. And I've witnessed the commercial pressure mixed with journalism myself. So my questions are sort of based partly on that actually, is how do you see the trends in terms of commercial pressure, how it's going to change the way organizations, news, journalists, media operate? What the biggest, be specific, what's the biggest challenge or the biggest 1 or 2 challenges in terms of the news coverage? Which types of media are we talking about that are the challenges? And a sort of second follow-up related question, where does sensationalist, gutter press like the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, where do they fit into this relationship with commercial pressures and so on? I'd be interested on your thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you. You want to start with answering to this question? Quickly, who wants to?
I'm happy to. So it's anecdotal data points rather than statistical or whatever. So there are 2 ways, 2 main avenues for business model. It's either reach ads supported or more consumer revenues where you have that deepened relationship with the user. So I think the Daily Mail and the Daily Express are in that camp. They are going for the reach, and that's what they're doing. When it comes to deepening the relationship, you see people like The Telegraph in the UK, where they've announced, their new CEO has clearly stated a vision for the company, and that's, onboarding everybody, the commercial staff and the editorial staff, on that 10 million registered users. And I think this is the basis for everything they're going to do. So when it comes to the commercial pressure on the editorial staff, I think it's twofold. One, what type of content do you create to convert those casual readers into those loyal readers. So then you convert them into registered users, and there is an argument as to, you know, do you use data? And whether it's the right thing to do. And then the other one is more something you touch on, which is the native advertising, so the sponsored. So, and it's how do you draw the boundaries between, you know, what you produce for the brand partnerships you deliver and your editorial independence. So and to me, it's just about the labeling. If you make it clear to the user that's what it is, then you're protecting your independence in some way. I don't know if that answers your question. Kind of.
That was the second. For the first one, about which are the trends now and the main challenges ahead? Denis?
Well, I can try to answer to that. I mean, up to my point of view and my understanding, I think one of the big trends that we face now for more than 20 years is the surge of the rise of the 24/7 news television. This was, started with more or less with CNN in 1981, and now we have something like 250, 300 world TV 24/7 channels, and this is becoming also on the web, because all those channels have platforms on the web. Some of them are even disappearing from broadcast and going to the web. There's a lot of public companies there, roughly maybe half private companies and public companies. So that's a big trend in terms of news business. And the news business is between two trends in itself. That's the live, real time on one side, and the what I would call explanatory journalism on the other side. Because when you see something live, most of the time you don't understand. I mean, every of you have seen the plane crashing into the towers on the 11th of September, but at that time, when you were in front of your TV, you didn't understand at all what was going on. And so we love as human beings to be aware of what's going on and to be informed in real time of what's going on. But at the same time, we need to get explanation. We need to make sense of it. No? So that's important in this respect. And in the last, I don't know if that's a trend, but something which is interesting in the last years is the rise of new publications. Well, not very much technical publications, but that's not newcomers or pure players from the web, like Mediapart, for instance, in France. But you have old newspapers like Süddeutsche Zeitung in Germany, for instance. We are very much involved in investigation journalism, and we have good success as well. They are raising in terms of circulation. Right now, you have the New York Times and the Financial Times, for instance, are rising also, because of Trump election, and the other one about the Brexit. So I hope that we will not have populist government everywhere on the earth for the public to understand that news and information is something important for democracy, and we need to support them, because when you don't think you don't need them, you don't support, but it still costs money to write and to report about news. But that's these are the trends that we can identify probably right now.
I would add also data journalism as a rising trend. And it also brings in more transparency on the work of journalists and more accountability on what they're doing.
If we are talking about data-driven journalism, what is doing Süddeutsche Zeitung when we are working with Paradise Papers or big affairs like that, which are data-driven journalism, so bringing new stories and new stuff from the data.
The other point is collaboration. I see more and more journalists collaborating, and this is very encouraging, I think. So for example, I'm sorry I'm giving lots of UK examples, I realize that, but recently the UK Regionals organization, so John's Press, Newsquest, Trinity Mirror, who are fierce competitors in some parts of the countries, all got together to do a big survey for Brexit. And they all shared the results. So it's Trinity Mirror data unit who process the data, but they all share the data amongst themselves, and then they produce articles that were relevant for their local communities. I just think that's really, you know, amazing that they all got together to do that kind of project.
That's a good way to aggregate resources which are scarce in newsrooms right now. But that's also a good way to learn from each other.
Yes.
That's very important this way. That's what we do. In InVid, we shared the plugin with all the media because we are learning a lot from BBC, from France 24, and we are learning from some specific needs they have, and that will come our needs at some point.
Yes, it's also what we do with the European Data Journalism Network, and collaboration is great, but it's not always easy because journalists have their own habits and they don't like to change if there's not something important at stake. There was a second question over there from the ladies over there.
Thank you very much. Angela Millswade from European Publishers Council. I've got a question for Mr. Jaspers, but I just wanted to make a comment on the comments not being dealt with by the main newspaper organisations. You only have to look at something on Facebook Live. So, for example, news organisations will sometimes have a broadcast of an interview or whatever. And if you look at the comments underneath, they are hate-filled, vile, and often very, very illegal. And the newspaper companies just couldn't cope with that. So it's not a question of just having interactions with journalists on nice, educated comments. It is just uncontrollable. And some of the newspapers still do it, and they have people who are moderating this 24/7. Anyway, just to say that the scale of the problem is immense. But my question was actually about native advertising. I don't know the proportion of, or how many complaints you get a year from consumers generally, but what is the proportion of the complaints you get around native advertising? And do you ever cooperate in any way with the advertising self-regulatory organisation? Because there are actually very clear rules, as Benedict was implying, around how you label such things. And certainly under the advertising codes, there's an obligation that there's a clear separation between advertising and editorial content. So I just wondered what you feel is the scale of the problem from the editorial perspective.
My question is also about the comments. Maybe I can add to it. I want to say something, react to what Mr. Smith said, but I hope I get a reaction from all members of the panel. You mentioned that the newspapers closed the comments section because it was too much to them, and you compared it to a cookies factory or cookie shop. But they would anyway make any profit with it. And with the comments, you do not make any profit. You don't get money for your clicks as you get for advertisements. So I think that's the difference. But the problem, I think, was also that there has to be moderation. And the people who were moderating it, well, it was, as far as I know, one organization in Almere, and they worked for both the Volkskrant and for the Telegraaf and for other organizations. And they did not have the intellectual level to moderate. So many times they said, well, it's not allowed what you write because it's racist or discrimination or whatever. And it was not, but they did not know it because they are too young and did not have enough education to understand it. But the problem for the newspapers, of course, is that at the moment everybody starts immediately to complain about racism, discrimination, words that have lost their meaning, in my opinion. And so they were scared. And that was, in my opinion, one of the reasons they closed it down. And my question to the panel is, how do we solve the problem?
Who wants to start?
I mean, you were...
the cookie seller.
The cookie seller, you were responding to me, right? Yeah? And you as well. Well, I think I'm going to come back to my point in the sense that the comment sections are an instrument, right? It's not an end in itself, but every instrument can be used both for the bad and for the good. And of course, the comments in itself do not bring in money. But if you are working on deepening the relationship with your user, and you're shutting down the instrument that can offer that interaction, that is something detrimental if you want to invest in it and if you want to get people who become more loyal. And of course I understand the tremendous problem that's happening right now, or that was happening, since they've pretty much all of them been closed with the hate speech and with the radical ideas that were posted in the comments. But then again, there should be, that then is a very clear problem that we should work on. People want to interact, we don't get the interaction that we want. How do we change that? How do we get that problem into an opportunity to actually form better relations with people instead of just shutting it down because it's not working the way that we want it to right now?
You were asking something about the complaints concerning native advertising. It's very difficult because there has been a French survey about the problem, and it shows that only 19% of the internauts notice the difference between editorial content and advertising content on sites that use native advertising. So there has been only one complaint on that ground, but it's very useful because it's the occasion of deepening the question and giving an advice that will serve to all newsrooms to fix their position. The main problem from my point of view is that many publishers have a tendency to tell their journalists that they have to take part in native advertising and to be producers, to produce native advertising in the name of the publisher. And that is, of course, something that is not acceptable. That was the purpose of the complaint, and it served as an example of things that should not be allowed. And now journalists can resist the pressure coming from their publisher.
But in many, many cases, the news organisations have different writers. They don't actually use the journalists who are doing the reporting. They have copywriters. You know, they have specialists who are doing it.
Yeah, of course. But I think it's very problematic because people, writers, readers, and viewers don't really notice the difference. That's the point, of course. That's why native advertising has been invented. It's because it's difficult to see the difference.
Some would argue it's less intrusive than pop-ups.
Yeah, it doesn't work. These banners don't work. So.
Okay, we have time for a last question, if there is any. Otherwise,
Hello, Olivier Braat from the VUB, Free University of Brussels, the Dutch-speaking counterpart of Jean-Jacques' French-speaking University of Brussels. So I'm still a bit searching for a reply to the question, resisting commercial correctness. And one thing that was missing for me was if we want to resist commercial correctness, we have to first look at the commercial logic that drives, for example, the business model of Google. And although I'm the first to commend Google on, for example, its fight against Chinese self-censorship, I still think that Google, although you say Google is search, from a technological point of view that's true, but your business model is advertisement brokering. And if I look at one World War II documentary on YouTube, all the recommendations are clickbait-like, sometimes neo-Nazi videos. The things that rile you up most are rewarded. So basically my question is, will Google try to tweak its algorithm so that quality news is more rewarded than the news that creates the most clicks with which you can earn the most money? Is that in the pipeline?
So part of the announcement we made in New York on the 20th of March, Richard Gingras, I think, touched on that. And I think it differentiated you touch on the live versus the explanation things. And it's, Google is, and YouTube is all about mixing relevance with authoritativeness of the content. So that and the reason I mention that is because in a live situation, then I think what they're doing at the moment is tweaking the algorithm to give more prominence to the authoritativeness of the content. And so there are things, I don't know if you've noticed on YouTube, but there is top news stories, and those are manually selected authoritative news source of information. And in the search, so text-based search or mobile, they are tweaking currently to bring up that authoritativeness more prevalent than the relevance. So, yes, I hope that answers your questions. It's never going to be 100% success rate because of the sheer scale and also because of the bad actors out there. So, our constant battle since Google was founded is around spam. And this is similar to some extent to spam. It's just how you tweak and you fine-tune the algorithm to try to remove those bad actors from the results.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Benedict. Thank you for attending and for being patient with my bad English. Thanks to our guests and to our hosts, and see you maybe next year, and enjoy the rest of the day at the Difference Day here in Beaux-Arts. Thank you.
Thank you.